Welcome to the inaugural post-game show on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, we did not go to the game, so we could do this for Ohio State fans who want to dive in right after the game. This is a big deal for us.
Yeah. It was strange.
Strange.
not being there. But it offers a different perspective, I think. I think the thing we're going to like about this is that you and I are kind of at home watching a TV thing, able to kind of rewind stuff, dig in a little bit more than we would otherwise watching it live in the press box. And then we have Berman Austin there in Bloomington. And eventually, I think we're all going to be part of this. For the time being, those guys are still going to have snap judgments. We're doing this thing. The plan is for down the road to kind of blend them all together so you get all that perspective in one show. But if anyone's wondering where that is, like, you'll get that. You'll hear from Berman Austin in Bloomington, and you're going to hear from us right now.
So this post-game show will only get better over the course of the season, but we're bringing it to you right now. 23-3, Ohio State beats Indiana. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks. We're going to talk about the offensive line. We're going to talk about the defense. We do want to start off. We understand this is not a win that's going to have Ohio State fans dancing in the streets, but Landis, I think it is important. It is a win. It was a 20-point win. They did not cover the spread, but the game was never really in doubt. We want to start with things that we liked. One thing each. What did you like about the way Ohio State played on Saturday?
Yeah, so I guess if I were to give a hyper specific thing and not just sort of say the defense generally, I would say the cornerback play when they were challenged, I thought was promising. Indiana, I think, clearly was pretty content to just sort of sit on the ball and try to lose close. Like they were just running triple option offense for much of this game. So it wasn't a game where they were really challenging Ohio State down the field at all, but you kind of knew it was coming, right? They were running the ball, and you're thinking to yourself, like, when's the shot play going to come? And they tried it in the first half. I think it was on the first drive that Taven Jackson was in there, quarterback. They tried a little play action shot play down the middle of the field. It was Denzel Burke and Lathan Ransom just had it bracketed. It was dead.
Yes.
Even if it was a good throw, I don't think it would have been completed. There was a third down play where Denzel Burke got challenged and had a PBU. Again, probably one of the only few plays he had to make on the day, but he made it. So I thought to see the corners, I think more or less back up what we heard about them in spring. Granted, in not a throwing game, there are going to be games where they're going to be tested much more than they were tested on Saturday. But when their number was called in a game that was closer than everybody thought it was going to be, and there was a chance for Indiana to maybe spring a big play or two that really could have made this wonky, I thought the defensive back stepped up.
We'll talk much more about the defense later on. There was a fourth down play where Davis and Igbinosun was Damon Arnett level handsy and got called for a pass interference. It's like, oh, back in the day, we remember when Ohio State DBs played like that sometimes. But for the most part, all they talked about all spring, all August is defensive backs getting their hands on balls. And it felt like they were on top of that. Can I just say, the thing that I didn't like was Tom Allen playing to cover. Like, what are you doing?
Unbelievable.
You're in the Big Ten. And you're going to run triple option. You're just trying not to lose by a lot. They're 9 of 21 for 82 yards throwing the ball. They never tried to win. It's not non-conference. It's not a money game. It's not getting $1.8 million to come to Ohio Stadium and lose and prop up the rest of your athletic department. I mean, that part of it is embarrassing to me. Yeah. So, I thought we didn't even get that much of a read on the defense because they played Navy football.
Poorly.
I guess they're going to run triple option.
Yeah.
What are you doing? It's like, we're going to go on the road for a Big Ten opener. I thought that there's a part of this that is like, I don't even know what the read is because Tom Allen was like, I don't know. You think we can only lose by 20? Will that keep my job? What if Tom Allen had tried? Maybe try. I mean, he's not even going to have a job next year. It bothers me when teams don't try. I love when underdogs take on the Buckeyes and take a swing. These guys didn't even take a swing.
They did not take a swing. And Tom Allen was smiling on the sideline after, what did they kick a field goal? No, what did they do to give the Ohio State the ball back at the end of the first half?
They went for it on fourth down.
They went for it on fourth down to give Ohio State good field position and give Ohio State a free 3 points.
Yeah.
When they could have just kicked the field goal, punted them deep. Probably punt them deep was the more appropriate thing to do at that time. Just gave them the ball at midfield. Ohio State probably should have scored a touchdown. They didn't, but he still gave Ohio State 3 free points and then was smiling on the sideline because he was happy to only be losing by a touchdown.
So Tom Allen can cram it. As for if you're going to be that, don't take the money. Don't take the TV money and then come out and play like your Youngstown State. Because if you're going to play like your Youngstown State, then take 1/30th of the TV money. They get the same TV money as Ohio State to basically take a knee for 3 downs and punt and smile their way through a 20-point loss. It's a joke. They should. Tony Petitti, his first act as Big Ten commissioner, should be to fine Tom Allen for not trying to win. You don't even get a read. You can't get a read on what Ohio State is. Okay, here's what I liked. Chip Trainum. I'm trying to think of a nickname. When he had the drive, when he was the tailback all the way down the field, and then when they got in the red zone, he was the fullback, and he's both things, and he's possibly, and we'll talk about this more, their best tailback and also their best fullback. It's like Curtis Samuel in 2016, when Curtis Samuel was simultaneously Ohio State's best receiver and best running back. So I'm workshopping Dump Truck Curtis. Like I'm trying to find a nickname that encapsulates that he's playing 2 distinct positions. And I think you could make an argument that he is the best player on the team at both of them. What did you think of Chip Trainum on Saturday?
Interesting. We got tipped off a little bit by a video that Ohio State had put out. I think maybe last week, maybe it was earlier this week. One of the highlight videos, I think it might have been for the running backs. There was a play where Chip Trainum was lead blocking for Dallin Hayden, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that might show up on Saturday." It showed up. He was like playing the Mitch Rossi role, and then he was awesome as a tailback. And they also on maybe it was the second to last drive, or maybe the third, a drive in the fourth quarter. He was just like playing tight end. Like they put him in like the sniffer position behind the line where they put the guy when they run split zone and that guy blocks back across the formation. Like that was Chip Trainum. So I don't know. He is apparently very important to this offense now. He runs really well. I like him. He's decisive, like a one cut guy. Seems to follow his blocks very well. Top end speed, I think, is good, although we didn't really see him get loose in that way. Maybe he lacks like the really, extraordinary make you miss kind of stuff at the second level, but I don't care. I want a guy that like can consistently run for 6, and then whatever happens after that happens. And I think Chip is that kind of guy.
I think Ryan Day likes a physical runner and likes a guy who's going to hit the hole and go. We tracked different things in this game. I tracked running back usage. TreVeyon Henderson, 33 snaps. Chip Trainum, 23 snaps. Mayan Williams, 16 snaps. Dallin Hayden, 3 snaps at the end. By half, first half, it was TreVeyon 20, Mayan 9, Chip 6, and a couple of those from Chip were when he was like an offset tight end or a fullback. Second half, Chip Trainum 17 snaps, TreVeyon Henderson 13. TreVeyon Henderson basically didn't play the final 20 snaps of the game while the rest of the first team offense was out there. It wasn't like, oh, they took the starters out. And from what Austin and Berm said, there didn't seem to be any indication at the game that there was an injury issue with TreVeyon Henderson. It feels like they like Chip Trainum in a role, and it feels like he's running back 2 right now ahead of Mayan Williams, that Mayan Williams is like in the middle of the field, TreVeyon's 1, Chip is 2, and then in the red zone, it's Mayan with Chip as the lead blocker. Do you think this might be a look on how this shakes out, not just today, but going forward?
I think that Mayan is perhaps a bit banged up. We did see him in camp at times favoring what looked like a lower leg thing. And I think he was out of practice for a while. So I'm probably not going to go quite that far just yet. I think today that was true. I think a healthy Mayan is probably still number 2 or RB1, maybe depending on how things go between he and TreVeyon Henderson. But I think it was more of a deal like Mayan's not 100%. We don't want to give him 25 carries in this game, but he's healthy enough that we can use him as the guy who finishes off drives in the red zone, and that's more or less what he did. But Ryan Day sort of couched this as initially it was like TreVeyon and everyone else. And then it was like TreVeyon, and then like Mayan and Chip are coming. Like we think they're going to be part of this too. And like Dallin Hayden, there was like separation there, and then Evan Pryor's like, we'll see what we can do. So I wasn't surprised to see Chip get into the game. I guess I was in the end surprised with how much work he got, but I do think some of that is probably a byproduct of Mayan Williams not quite being 100%.
TreVeyon Henderson, 12 carries, 47 yards. Chip Trainum, 8 carries, 57 yards. Mayan Williams, 7 carries, 25 yards. We want to focus. I mean, this is a nod to Chip. Dump Truck Curtis. If people have better ideas, I'm open for it. I think we have to come up with something here.
I think there is a thing like in England, like there's like a chip truck, or maybe it's like in Canada too. It's like a food truck that like sells French fries. You call it the chip truck.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you like walked up to Chip Trainum on the sidewalk and he handed you a French fry, it'd be like, oh, the visit to the chip truck.
This is the
Yeah,
chip truck.
I'm down
Yeah.
with the chip truck. All right,
Yeah.
so the chip truck got work done. We got to tip the cap to that. I did a thing last preseason when they had 1 million linebackers, and I asked all the linebackers in the room, who's the fastest linebacker, who's the smartest linebacker, who's the strongest linebacker, all these superlatives. And Chip Trainum was practically unanimously voted by his linebacker peers as the fastest and the strongest. He's a crazy athlete. And so I do appreciate the idea of Ohio State finding a way to use this guy, but I'm also kind of amazed that a guy who transferred here from Arizona State to be a linebacker might be their best option running the ball.
I mean, he was a pretty good running back at Arizona State. And he is, I think my nutshell sort of for Chip Trainum is like, he is Master Teague if Master Teague had any shred of agility to move laterally, which he did not. When he tried to change direction, it was like an aircraft carrier trying to turn. Chip is not that. Chip has at least that one sudden cut where he can get his foot in the ground and get vertical, and then he probably has the same long, like Master Teague had really good long speed. Just took him a while to like get in position to use it. Chip can use it, and he's pretty fast.
Okay. That's what we liked the most about this game. There's many other things to talk about. We know Ryan Day is in the post-game news conference, has talked a little bit about the quarterback situation. We are going to dive in with our views on Kyle McCord, who basically played the whole game, and Devin Brown, who barely got to play at all. But we're gonna let a little bit of that percolate still. And let's go to the offensive line, because we did divide this up. I really focused on watching Josh Simmons at left tackle the entire game, and you focused on watching Josh Fryer at right tackle the entire game. We'll start with you. What did you think of how Josh Fryer played on Saturday?
Yeah, okay. I thought that side of the offensive line was more or less, like okay to pretty good. I don't know. I don't know that I felt like I was seeing kind of consistent breakdowns there. Certainly could have been more consistent. I think that's true for the whole line. But I thought Josh was pretty good. And I thought in the second half, when they did get a little bit of run game going, it seemed like it was coming off that right side with him and Matthew Jones kind of leading the way a little bit. So I thought it was, a solid debut for Josh Fryer, probably about what I expected. And I will, as we're talking about tackles here, I do want to give a little bit of a nod to Carson Hinsman, who I thought was pretty okay too. Like, I thought there was a chance, for all the talk we had about tackles, that like the center position might be a disaster in this game. And I'm not saying Carson Hinsman played perfectly, but I don't recall like throwing my hands in the air thinking to myself like, oh boy, they're messing around at center here throughout the game. So I thought he did okay for what was his first college action ever.
Nod to that. It didn't feel like there was ridiculous breakdowns up the middle with Indiana. I mean, there was that guy, was it 44, who was just like shooting every gap at times.
Well, yeah, when the ball's on the hash and everyone in the world knows you're going to run stretch into the boundary, it's easy to do that.
Oh, Bill wants to have a play calling discussion. We will have a play calling discussion. I watched Josh Simmons, and someone on Twitter said Landis was right about right tackle, and I was right about left tackle, because your view on right tackle was, I think Josh Fryer is going to be pretty good. And my view on left tackle was, I think this is going to be a problem. And it felt like it was a decent chunk of a problem on Saturday. And again, to me, it's not a Josh Simmons conversation. It's a situation Ohio State put itself in conversation, which led to them getting a guy who started 1 year at San Diego State at right tackle and now is going to be the starting left tackle at Ohio State. I thought actually they did not put him in real situations he didn't feel like he was on an island very much. There was a lot of help on his side. I felt like there were multiple situations where when the play started going, like it kind of wound up that he had nobody to block. Like he'd be at the second level kind of looking for somebody and there was nobody there. It didn't feel like a difficult game for him. It wasn't like he's lining up opposite, because the Big Ten has edge guys sometimes. Yep. This wasn't lining up opposite Aiden Hutchinson and being like, good luck. This isn't what, it's not going to be what Chop Robinson's going to be when they get to that Penn State defensive line. But the play that Kyle McCord had to scoot on one of the early series, it's because Josh Simmons got knocked backwards with the bull rush and just got blown into the backfield. A couple of the blitzes got through on his side. I'm not saying it's necessarily his fault, but they attacked that side and it wasn't picked up. And I felt like they kind of went out of their way in both the run game and the pass game to help him out. And when there wasn't help and they needed something there were a lot of times I thought where they didn't get it. And so I come away from this game thinking that, and this is a larger discussion about the offensive line and the way they threw the ball or didn't throw the ball or tried to throw the ball or didn't try to throw the ball. It feels like they are not yet ready to be who they have been and want to be as a passing offense, because I don't think they trust their pass protection.
Yeah.
And so, like, that idea, they didn't even try stuff. They got the ball out of Kyle McCord's hands pretty quick. They did focus on running the ball. They didn't take a ton of downfield shots. You know, he missed the one to Julian Fleming early. But I did not think it was a good game for the left tackle spot. And it felt like if it continues this way, it possibly will prevent Ohio State from being who they want to be.
If it continues this way, I agree. And listen, I get that people don't want to hear this. I do think there is a little bit of like grace required when we're talking about early season offensive line play, particularly guys who are playing together for the first time. And that's not to excuse poor play. I think it's just to acknowledge that perhaps there's a chance it could get better. And I'm not saying it's definitely going to. What we saw today was not good enough. And if it persists, it's going to be bad, especially in a couple of weeks when they go up to South Bend to play Notre Dame. So it was worse than I thought it would be. I will say that. Like, I know I've been a little more, I don't know. I guess I've tried to be like a little more fair with the offensive line and perhaps not going as far with my concern as I should have coming into the season. And so this was a little worse off than I thought it would be. I did not track. Did you track how much they played with two tight ends? Because it felt like it was like 90% of the time.
I did not track it, but yes, it did feel like a lot. It felt like oftentimes when it was there, it was on the left side.
Yeah, so they're helping guys. They're chipping with running backs, like, and obviously you can't. I don't think you can be yourself if you have to constantly do that. So if they need to continue doing that, then I agree it is a problem. I was a little disappointed. Like, I guess I'm not terribly surprised that there were some pass protection struggles with Josh Simmons, because we saw that at San Diego State. He didn't have a false start penalty, which I guess is like, if we want to tip our cap to him, like, he had a bunch of them in San Diego State. He didn't have one in this game. So good for him for getting some of that figured out, I guess. There were a couple run plays where, like, I was hopeful that if he didn't pass protect very well, that he would at least like pick it up a little bit in the run game. And like, he got totally blown off the ball kind of on the quarterback counter. They tried to run with Devin Brown on fourth down, and that play got blown up. The play at the end of the first quarter was like an outside run to Travion Henderson that I think went for like 4 yards and ended up getting a first down, but I think it could have been a touchdown if Josh Simmons climbed to the second level the way he's supposed to, instead of turning around and running back to the play and trying to pick somebody up. He kind of just left the free hitter there for Travion, and that play died. So it was not a great start. I mean, I guess I'll say, like, I didn't notice him as much in the second half. That's probably a byproduct of getting more help and changing the way they were doing things a little bit. Perhaps on a rewatch, I might feel a little better about he progressed in the game. But yeah, it did feel like in the first half, you were looking at that left tackle spot quite a bit when things were unraveling.
It does feel like what people like about him the most, or talk about Josh Simmons, is that ability to get to the second level.
Mhm.
And I do think there are some run plays where I think you can find success there. When it's just him at the point of attack against the guy across from him, it doesn't feel like there's a lot there. It doesn't feel like there's a huge push. And one-on-one with the pass rusher, I would not have confidence in that right now. Again, it didn't feel like they left him in that situation very often. And again, if that's what you're going to do, if Fryer's going to hold it down on the right side and you're going to always give Josh Simmons help, okay. But did you think it influenced how they tried to throw the ball? Because they really were getting it out pretty quick for most of the game, weren't they?
Yeah, it was probably a little more conservative in terms of how much Ohio State typically pushes the ball down the field. I also think too that there were times where there may have been an opening down the field that we can't always see on the TV broadcast. Like, there were a couple of times where Kyle McCord, I thought, took a quick check down. I know they showed one play where like Marvin kind of broke open and Kyle probably could have hit him for a touchdown, but instead he threw it underneath. Yeah. I thought there were probably 3 to 5 plays like that where there were vertical concepts called, but Kyle took the shallow one that was closest to him, perhaps because he didn't trust the protection himself. But by and large, I do think the questionable pass protection probably did limit what they felt comfortable doing throwing the ball. But I don't want to say that they like never tried to push it, because I thought there were a handful of times they did and it just didn't work.
Should Donovan Jackson be the left tackle? Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not tomorrow. Certainly not at halftime today. Possibly before Notre Dame. I mean, I think you've got to let Josh Simmons have a little bit of run here.
Mm-hmm.
But I've certainly thought about Donovan Jackson as a left tackle for a long time. I know you've at least discussed it. It's been brought up, and Ohio State has kind of always poo-pooed it a little bit. But Kevin Wilson said he's like the second most talented offensive lineman he ever saw up close, and Kevin Wilson was coaching college football for 30 years. So that remains like maybe a last resort fallback to me that they could get to, because then I think you could have options, other guys to play at left guard, maybe Tegra Shabola at left guard, Enoch Vamahi, somebody else inside. Tegra Shabola is the backup left tackle behind Joshua Simmons. But to me, if you somehow would go to Tegra, then you'd flip-flop them, because you think Tegra is more of a guard anyway.
Yeah.
And from what we saw in practice, it didn't look like Tegra Shabola looked particularly comfortable at left tackle at this point. Maybe Luke Montgomery gets involved. I don't know. I'm not there tomorrow. But is this something that has to at least remain in the back of their minds? And is it something that to you remains a possibility at some point this season?
Yeah. I mean, I won't close the door on it. I think you have 2 games here where you could experiment a little bit. I don't know. Moving Donovan to left tackle, I think is a pretty drastic sort of last resort kind of move. You have Luke Montgomery, who they've talked about a lot. They used him in the Bison role as the kind of jumbo tight end a few times today. So maybe I'd like to see him get a look before you start moving around Donovan and then maybe playing Tegra at guard. Perhaps you want to give a look to Tegra at tackle to see what it looks like in a game. Perhaps it looks different. So I think all options should probably be on the table. I'm not like in full blown panic mode at all. I do think you need to let Josh Simmons like try to get his feet under him a little bit and build a little bit of a rhythm playing next to Donovan Jackson, understanding what this offense is like playing in games. You're going to play one very overmatched opponent next week, and then another one in 2 weeks in Western Kentucky, which I don't think is going to present a tremendous defensive challenge for Ohio State. So, maybe some confidence can be built there that gives Josh Simmons a chance of playing at a higher level when the chips are really down against Notre Dame at the end of September. So I'm not quite there yet, or really, I don't even know if I'm close to there yet. I think it's worth pointing out, keeping in the back of people's minds, fairly criticizing, but I don't think you start moving guys around just yet.
I apologize to anyone who's watching here. I am sick and I am sweating like a beast. So I can feel it dripping down my body, and I apologize that you may have to see that. I'm going to dab my forehead. We're going to take a 5-second break, and then we will be right back with the post-game show on the podcast. All right, Landis, I dabbed myself. Let's talk quarterback. We have some handle from what Ryan Day said post-game on how this shook out. What did you think of the fact that Devin Brown basically didn't play? Were you shocked by that or not shocked?
Yeah, pretty shocked. I thought that it might be something like a 70-30 snap breakdown with Kyle McCord getting the lion's share of that, but that Devin Brown was going to play and they were going to have a plan to put him in the game. And maybe they had a plan to put him in if they were up comfortably early, and they weren't. They scored 1 touchdown in the first half. But, I mean, he was, with the exception of the one drive he got in the second quarter, he got it. They treated him like a true backup, which I did not think was going to happen.
Yeah, Ryan Day, this is what Austin said, summarizing what Ryan Day said post-game. He said he wanted to get Devin Brown in on the 3rd series and then maybe like the 5th or 6th series, but it didn't sound like there was ever an intention for them to really split it. I think they could have done better. I don't know what the intention was, because like Indiana's doing the same thing and Indiana split it. Now also Indiana wasn't trying to win, so that maybe affects the plan. I'm confused, and the thing that I wonder about, like if I'm confused and you're confused and fans are confused, do you think Devin Brown's confused?
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. Like, we're not privy to those conversations, right? If what Ryan Day said to us on Tuesday is more or less what he had been saying to both players all week, then yeah, he probably is. Because this was not like both guys are going to play.
No.
This was well short of that. And like you and I are sending messages back and forth to each other on Slack during the game. Like, I think this is a time to get Devin in. I think this might be a time to get Devin in. And like, it never happened. So I don't know what we're doing here. And it's not even about really Kyle McCord so much and the way he played. It was just about like, we were led to believe that this was something that it's ultimately not. I don't know. There were multiple openings. Like, this was a closer game than it should have been, clearly. Like, it was never in my mind remotely close to being in jeopardy. Ohio State was going to win, and you could have played Devin much more than you did.
It felt like that he didn't want to play Devin Brown in a one-score game. That like so they start off, Kyle McCord obviously starts the game, and Ohio State marches down for a touchdown. The second drive is a punt, and then I honestly thought that Devin Brown might come in for the third series. And as Austin's saying, Ryan Day said, I want to put him in for the third series. But they don't. They leave Kyle McCord in, and then that series with Kyle McCord ends with a pick. And then I thought, oh, well, he's not going to want to take Kyle out after he threw a pick.
Which is what he said.
Because now it feels punitive.
Right.
And then that's when he put Devin in. And then they put Devin in for handoff, quarterback power on 3rd and 1 that gets blown up because Josh Simmons doesn't block his guy. And like, that's it for Devin Brown until the last drive of the game in a blowout. I'm honestly dumbfounded by it. And it's hard to me. I don't know that you can read it as anything other than like a lack of trust in Devin Brown at this point.
Yeah, which I don't. I mean, I don't have anything concrete to say whether or not that should be the case. I don't know. Like, it was described to us as neck and neck, right? Like, both guys can run the offense. There's trust in both of them. Both guys have won the team. Like, you didn't treat them that way. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's Ryan Day getting tight again, because he's done that in the past. And being worried about what it might mean to put Devin Brown in the game and throw the football. Like, he put him into the game on the last drive and like actually let him throw the ball, which is something he never does. He never lets the quarterback throw the ball in that situation.
Right.
So like, that was also a different way to approach things. But yeah, I don't, maybe I was naive to believe that it was actually going to be a situation where they were going to play both, but I did believe it. And he didn't do it. And honestly, even if they do it next week, I don't know what that means, because they're going to win by 100 next week. So, and I don't even know what it might mean against Western Kentucky. So it feels like it's over.
Yeah,
not that I think it should be, but that's what it feels like.
How could Devin Brown start against Notre Dame? He decided. And I'm not saying that that's like the wrong decision, but we've talked a lot about the process here and that the process matters. So I think one of the more difficult things you can create, and maybe he only did it publicly with the way he talked about it. Maybe he did not do it with his quarterbacks, and what he does with his quarterbacks is what's the most important thing. But certainly what he said publicly did not match what they did in the game. And I think that's a bad start to the process.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's you and I were, I think, not all that concerned about going into the season with wanting to play 2, because we trusted they would have a good process to do so.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they do. But it also doesn't really seem like it's a plan to play 2 either. So like, I'm not saying like the process is bad, they're going to screw this up. I just maybe feel like they abandoned the actual plan to play both of them, or didn't embrace it the way I thought they would.
And this also becomes a thing where Ryan Day is trying to be the head coach of the entire team, the play caller of the offense, and the decider of the quarterback room. And in the middle of a game, when you are trying to win, and that's all you're thinking about, what the head coach wants trumps what the quarterback decider wants. And when you're all you have your split personalities 3 ways. You're doing 3 different things. And that's a very difficult thing. If Brian Hartline was like out there calling all this every single play, and Ryan Day is just like making sure everybody's feeling good on the sideline, strategy, and focusing on the quarterbacks. But he's also trying to figure out like what should we do on 3rd and 6?
Yeah.
And it felt like in the moment, in a game that was a little wonky, he did maybe abandon what he thought he was going to do because maybe he had too many things going on at once. I do think this. It's possible they get to the right solution. If the right solution is it's Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord's a quarterback. He's a year older. They trust him. He made some good throws on Saturday, and we'll talk about Kyle McCord in a second. But if that's the solution, but I don't know that they're going to get there through a great process. They might stumble into
it, yeah.
I guess it's Kyle McCord because, like, I don't know, we kind of forgot to play. Not that they forgot to play Devin, but we couldn't make ourselves play Devin, even though that's what we said the plan was going to be. So I'll be curious to get to Tuesday and ask Ryan Day about the specifics of, like, why didn't what you did, you didn't do the way you described what you were going to do. Like, what happened?
This is among the most, this might be the most surprised I've been maybe covering this team. Cause I was just so certain they wanted to see Devin in a game.
Yes.
Like that's all this was. Like the reason for the wishy-washy talk about the position for the last 3 weeks is because they were trying to thread a needle and they wanted to see Devin like play in a real game. And then they just didn't do it. I don't understand it. And like, it's not like the final score still could have been 23-3 had they played Devin more than they played him. I'm not saying like that was a difference between this game being closer than it should and not. But it's not, as we sit here right now, like it's not a competition, right?
No, how can it be?
Yeah.
He played as like Tate Martell played more than Devin Brown played. So Chris Chuganoff played more than Devin Brown played. This was, and it's the thing that we talked about in trying to evaluate this is maybe Kyle McCord is the guy you trust a little bit more in the everyday game, take care of the ball, and maybe Devin Brown's a little bit more of the upside play. Maybe Devin Brown is the guy you need to beat Georgia or Michigan or LSU or Alabama, but maybe Kyle McCord is the guy you need to make sure you beat Indiana. Well, guess who you're playing on Saturday? You're playing Indiana. So you lean towards Kyle McCord in the make sure we don't screw it up game. But really, when you step back, like in the offseason, Ryan Day, what's he thinking about? He's thinking about the over-the-top game. But then when you get into the make sure we don't lose game, you can't make yourself do it. And you wind up with where you found yourself on Saturday, and it's just a tough place to be. So we're dumb. I get it. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I had a lot of faith in the process, and I don't have as much faith in the process right now.
100%. Yeah, I have lost faith in the process.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the quarterback. It's like you stumble backwards. Georgia had no process to get to Stetson Bennett. Georgia's process 2 years ago was, please, dear God, don't make us play Stetson Bennett. And then they did, and they won a national title twice with him. Yeah. So there are all kinds of terrible processes that lead to good results. And Kyle McCord, as the starting quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes, very possibly can be a very good result. What did you think of Kyle McCord on Saturday?
He looked like a guy who was starting for the first time, basically, in like a real game. Like some flashes of the arm talent for sure. Like the ball down the seam to Cade Stover was a really strong throw. The touch on the wheel route to Mayan Williams when like it felt like Ryan Day was challenging him on 4th and 6, I think, to go extend this drive. By the way, kicking a field goal then after doing that doesn't make any sense to me, but we can talk about that later. But I thought that was a nice touch throw from Kyle McCord. So you saw, I think, that he has he has a few different clubs in his bag in terms of being able to make different throws within the offense. I thought he got a little jittery at times, maybe feeling the pressure that was getting through, especially in the first half. He missed a walk-in touchdown by misreading a block on the play they called down in the red zone. And I did think that there were a couple of times, as I mentioned earlier, where he did take that check down just a little too early. And we heard that about him too in camp, right? I don't know that it was surprising, but I think there were times in the battle where Kyle was like kind of playing it safe a little bit, and that probably allowed Devin to kind of surge ahead of him at times. Obviously, it's a game you want to win. You're just doing whatever you can do to I don't know, not lose, I guess. Although like Ohio State shouldn't be acting that way against Indiana, so like I don't know. I take that back. I think he could have been more aggressive than he was. There were times where he was selectively aggressive, maybe, because there were times where he like threw a ball in the double coverage, which was a bad decision. The interception was an awful decision. But I thought there were opportunities to push the ball down the field where he didn't take them and instead took the safe play.
It can be a difficult thing to evaluate for guys like you and I, for the people in the chat, for fans watching on TV, to evaluate the throws a quarterback didn't make. And it does frustrate me sometimes when coaches, and I get why coaches do it, but it's why I like turnovers, because sometimes you got to risk, you got to maybe take a chance of turning the ball over to make a big play. And as long as you're not going like one big play, one turnover, maybe it's 4 big plays to 1 turnover. There's some ratio there where the turnover is worth it. But the evaluation of the throw you didn't make can be the difference between getting over the top and not, because you're going to beat Indiana whether you take those or you don't. And that idea, this is the very difficult thing after one game like this, where you don't want to go crazy. You understand that it's the first start for the tackles in this situation. It's the first start for the quarterback in this situation. But what makes Ohio State special is the passing game. And this passing game wasn't special. Not in a world where Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. were like non-factors. It's again, slightly remarkable that you have maybe not just the best duo, but maybe arguably the best 2 receivers in the country. They combined for 5 catches for 34 yards. Now the tight end went 5 for 98. But that's also a bit of that indication, right? Okay, well, we're taking the tight end. We're taking Julian Fleming, who maybe has the one-on-one matchup, but anything that's a little bit more difficult where a defense is trying to take away Marvin and Emeka, you let them take them away. 5 for 34 for those 2 guys is not going to get you anywhere. And it's game 1, but when that's the thing that separates you, that's your separator, and you don't see it, it can be a little worrying.
Yeah, and I you can't live in a world where those guys have 5 combined touches, or I guess Emeka, it was 6, as Emeka had the 1 run. And I suppose you don't want to do this with Marvin, I guess, in a game like this. And he took a bump and it looked like it might have been serious there for a second, but he did come back and play. Maybe that contributes to it too. Like, you still want him out there, but you're not going to force it his way if he's a little banged up. It did not feel like they were trying to like manufacture touches for them in a way like I think they clearly wanted to do it like a Jackson Smith and Jigba coming into last season, which was odd to me. It was almost like they were pretty content with sort of letting those guys be the people that kind of draw attention and then feed the ball elsewhere. I don't think that's how they're going to operate throughout the season, but it was still weird to see. Like, any game where Marv only has 2 catches for, what was it, 13 yards, or whatever it was, 16 yards. That does not quite compute. And they did try to get it to him a few more times. Like, Kyle underthrew him on a ball to the end zone that would have been a difficult catch either way. I don't know. He threw a ball behind Emeka on a slant, I think on a 3rd down, where Emeka was actually kind of covered. So maybe it was a good thing that it was behind him. But yeah, they did not. The thing that makes Ohio State was certainly not on display.
He threw the touchdown to Marv that got wiped off because he stepped out of bounds before the catch. Yep. That was the best sequence. It was right after the big throw down the seam to Cade Stover, and then he answers and throws it across the field for like a 30-yard touchdown to Marvin Harrison Jr. That it all worked. It worked how it should work. It's just Marv stepped out of bounds by 4 inches before the ball got there, so it was illegal touching, and it's not a touchdown.
They still finished that drive with a touchdown, right?
I think that's right. Yeah. So I don't know. There's like a world to me where you just can't allow someone to take Marvin Harrison Jr. away. Like, I don't care what they're doing. You're like quadruple covering the guy. Like, you can't allow it to happen. And we had talked a lot about this. The give and take was asking Marv about this at Big Ten Media Days. Like, the idea of a defense is going to try to take you away. What's going to happen then? And he's like, well, if that opens it up for somebody else, it's like, well, I mean, it didn't open it up for Emeka. I guess it opened it up for Cade Stover. They ran 67 offensive plays. I think 70 is about the normal threshold that we think about for the Ohio State offense. Is that fair, Landis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't like it wasn't like, oh, well, they lost 2 drives to the new clock rules or anything. I do think it's some combination of uncertainty on the offensive line, a new quarterback not maybe taking some shots that are there, and then some play calling that takes all that into account. But that's not a world that you can continue to live. Sometimes it's hard. It's like, oh, it was just one game. It's like, okay, I get it was one game and it was the first game. But by the way, by game 4, you can't do this. Like, this is not going to work by game 4.
So I think it's possible that, like, I think Indiana was doing stuff to take Marv away, and then when Marv was available, they didn't always go to him, and maybe they should have gone to him more. I think it's okay to force a ball to Marv every now and then. They didn't really do that. One real snap in the slot for Marvin.
So you were tracking that, right?
Yeah.
And then there was nothing to track.
There was nothing to track. There was like one play where like all three were to the same side, to the wide side of the field, and Emeka was inside, and then Marvin was between Emeka and Julian, but like Marvin was like still way outside the hashes. So I don't really count that as a slot snap for him, although maybe like people like PFF might. Like one true slot snap, and it was the one where they were down in the red zone and he like ran a kind of a crosser and Kyle like forced the ball to him. It was a play where they were talking about like, I don't think Marvin thought he was going to get the ball on that play.
Oh,
And
right.
that was when he was in the slot. Otherwise, unless I missed one, he wasn't there. And I do think they're going to do that, right? I think that's the way that you free him up for some of the increased attention that he's going to get. Whether or not you want to do that stuff against Indiana, I think is a fair question. So I guess in the end, I'm not terribly surprised that we didn't see it. And if he's going to otherwise kind of live isolated to the boundary like he said he did last year, then he's a little bit easier, I guess, to cover up for a defense. But when that happened, like when he wasn't getting the touches he needed to get early in the game, and then they didn't really go to anything to help manufacture getting the ball into his hands, I found that a little disappointing.
Yeah. So sometimes you don't want to give it away, I guess, right? I mean, this is always, I think this is a common discussion of when an offense is vanilla. It's like, are they vanilla on purpose because they don't want Notre Dame to have a bunch of film of Marv moving all over the field. So we won't know until you get to Notre Dame, until you get really tested. But also, you might want to work a few things out with your brand new quarterbacks, getting used to how you're actually going to play offense on the field when you play a good team. Maybe Marv's moving all over the field in practice, and that's great. And they just didn't want to show that today. But a little bit underwhelming on the passing game, and it's hard to give him a pass. Like this is it makes sense in week one that it takes a little time for that to come together. If you're a physical team, you can just come out and pound the ball. It's like, oh, you do what you do best right away. There's a little more precision to this. But I got to say, I guess Michael Penix at Washington's chucking it all over the place. Shedeur Sanders looked like a Heisman winner for Colorado. They're chucking it all over the place. And you watch that and you think, okay, well, whose passing game looked better, Colorado's or Ohio State's? And by the way, I think TCU is better than Indiana. So there are people who in week one, and now Shedeur Sanders started last year at Jackson State, so I get that. But there are some schools that are out chucking it around in week one, and Ohio State, who should do that better than anybody, wasn't one of them. So I'm not going to completely hand it over to like they're trying to be vanilla and not give Notre Dame a tip.
No, I don't think you should do that either, because I do think this is a thing that happens sometimes. And like Ryan Day said something early in the week that like kind of got my antennas up a little bit in a bad way, where he said like, we're going on the road. It's a Big Ten game. These games have been close in the first half. It's going to be a dogfight. And when he says those things during the week, he often leans into those ideas on Saturday and calls the game a little tighter. Doesn't really let the reins off. If they get a quick score or two, then maybe he will. Like they're a really good front running team. But I do think there are times when under Ryan Day, Ohio State like comes in. And I don't even know if conservative is the right word, because I could point in a few different directions with some of their run game calls that were diverse and different and a mix up, but they weren't putting the pedal down. And I think that is a product of like Ryan Day knowing that these openers on the road have gotten a little wonky for Ohio State in the past, and like he didn't want to potentially do something that exacerbates that. But in the end, he did something that exacerbated it by like being scared of it and not really like letting his offense be what it should be.
It wasn't the Georgia Ryan Day, the let it rip Ryan Day.
Certainly was not.
Felt much more like the Michigan Ryan Day, and also including a lack of execution on short yardage, on third and fourth down, on short yardage. They were not good. And you and I were talking about like the play. Was it fourth down? What was that they had? They tried to throw it to Chip Trainum out of a 3 tight end set, and Chip got knocked over. And so then it's the one McCord got picked. He threw back across his body, trying to throw it to Joe Royer. But you wind up in a world on 4th and 2 where the 3 guys in the route are Chip Trainum, Joe Royer, and Cade Stover, and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka are sitting on the sideline. And it's kind of like, what are we doing here?
I don't understand the incessant need to get into big personnel and get under center every single time you're in short yardage. And like they did it last year and it didn't work. Like it never worked. I thought they were past it, and then clearly they're not. So like their two ideas when they're in short yardage are like get big and play smash ball and hope you can move a guy and get 2 yards. Or I guess now run play action and throw the ball to your fullback, which worked on the first fourth down they converted and didn't work the second time they tried to convert on fourth down. What I thought was interesting is that when Devin Brown got into the game and they were in a short yardage situation, they lined up in the shotgun and tried to run the quarterback, like some of the stuff they did with CJ Stroud last year against Northwestern when they couldn't throw the ball in 80-mile-an-hour winds. You need to be able to do that in short yardage. Like you can't have 2 plays when it's 4th and 2 or 3rd and 2, like, and everyone knows what you're going to do. I guess on one hand you could say like, well, Ohio State should out execute Indiana and just move them off the line and get those 2 yards. And I don't disagree with that, but that's not really what we're talking about here. This is an issue that goes back to the start of last season. They are wholly uncreative in 3rd and short. And somebody made a good point on the message board at Rivals, and they said the 4th down call should be the 3rd down calls. It was like after they threw that wheel route to Mayan Williams on 4th down, which I thought like, yeah, that's probably true. Like their 3rd and short calls stink. And sometimes he is willing to get a little more creative on 4th down. But by and large, it's just like, we're going to get big and prove a point. Well, like it's been, 15 games now going back to last year, and the point has yet to be proven, or 14 games.
Or we're going to get big and trick you and then throw it. And it's like, just throw it regular. Just throw it.
Line up, put your best players on the field, line up in shotgun, have your entire offense at your disposal.
Although I will say, like you and I had a Slack conversation about that, and I think their next short yardage play, they tried to throw a little slant to Emeka with regular personnel, and the defensive end dropped into coverage and knocked it down. So
yeah, that's fine. Either. I mean, yeah, but I'd rather do that than line up and run the same play over and over again.
What's the best way to fail on short yardage?
It's process. We're talking about process. Right?
We are. It is a little remarkable. And then they didn't really run. McCord had a nice scramble, pretty nice scramble early on when Josh Simmons got blown up on a play. Yep. And then, as you said, the called QB run in the red zone where Chip Trayanum blocked it and Kyle McCord read it wrong and should have been able to walk in. But they didn't run the quarterback a ton, which we thought they maybe, because it feels like sometimes, especially in the red zone, Ryan will then bring up like, well, when you don't have a quarterback run game, it can get hard in the red zone. And Kevin Wilson used to always talk about like the field shortens. And if you don't have a quarterback who can run, like, what are you going to do? And it's like, okay, well, now you have a quarterback who can run because Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, both, I think, are more natural doing that than CJ. And also you have a backup quarterback. So you're more willing to get your quarterback hurt, which is basically what they've said. But then we didn't really see that either.
No, two designed runs and then the scramble from Kyle McCord. Like I was like screaming at my television on some of the shorter yardage plays, like get in the shotgun and run zone read just like one time, see if it works. Because usually when they do it, it works. As they do it so infrequently that it catches teams off guard. But they didn't try it. Again, is that we can beat Indiana with one head tied behind our back? Maybe. I don't know, but it doesn't make for a particularly fun watch when they're going through and choosing to play offense that way.
It's quite possible that Ryan Day and Tom Allen just met at midfield before the game and were both like, are you good with a 20-point win? You good with a 20-point loss? Yeah, no, that's good with me. That's good with me. Let's go home. And they just agreed to do it this way. Ryan Day doesn't want to give anything away, and Tom Allen thinks this is 5% closer to keeping his job if he doesn't lose to Ohio State by 60. So here we are. All right, quick break. I've soaked through the top half of my shirt with my sweat of the sick. When we come back, we'll talk about the defense after I dab myself. Next on the postgame show on the podcast. All right, Doug and Landis are back. Not a full read on the defense, given that they played Navy West. But what did you think of how the Ohio State defense played?
Yeah, I mean, they did what they had to do. It was not the game plan I was expecting. And I made a joke about this. Last year, Indiana played terribly at the fastest pace possible. And in this game, they decided to play terribly at the slowest pace possible. In the end, they are still ineffective. Walt Bell should have to walk back to wherever he's from and never call a game again because he stinks. So the defense just smothered a team that wasn't going to try to throw the ball and ran a lot of triple option stuff and probably didn't even make the right reads half the time when it was doing it anyway. So what you want to see there is the defensive line build a wall, linebackers flow to the right places, guys make a play in the backfield a time or two when those runs do get out wide and threaten the edge a little bit. And they did that. There were a couple longer completions, I guess, but nothing that I was overly concerned about. Not a ton of penalties. So I thought they were good. I thought they were fine. I thought they were what they were last year, which is when they played bad offenses last year, they made them look like bad offenses, and that's what they did against Indiana.
No breakdowns, right? I mean, considering what everybody remembers from the last 2 games Ohio State played last year, particularly against Michigan and then the touchdown against Georgia, like no freebies, no blown coverages, no, wait, why did this guy, how is somebody running free? Which is not nothing, because we talk about it when they happen. So when they don't happen, I think we have to talk about that too. Again, Indiana is not going to challenge you at all in the passing game because Tom Allen is celebrating the greatest 20-point loss in Indiana history. But still, and you mentioned it right off the top, the one deep shot they took, Denzel Burke and Lathan Ransom were right there. That is something, right?
Yeah, I thought so. Because you can get lulled to sleep in a game like this, and and they were not. They were never really caught off guard of the 2 or 3 times that Indiana did try to throw a wrinkle at them. And honestly, the triple option stuff in itself was probably a wrinkle. It'd be interesting to talk to Jim Knowles and ask how much they prepared for that kind of stuff. And I guess that was probably what the Indiana run game looked like last year a little bit. Again, this wasn't super effective. So yeah, they answered the bell. They kept them out of the end zone. They held them to 1 field goal. That's what you want to see. And like you saw a little bit of a flash from like Sonny Styles and a little bit of a flash from Malik Hartford, and Hero Canoe got a sack, and Caden Curry I thought like played really hard and kind of showed up the way you wanted them to. I know I saw some stuff about like, lack of pass rush, like they're not showing up, they're not getting the quarterback. What did Indiana threw? How many passes? Yeah, they threw. Brendan Sorsby attempted 16 passes. Taven Jackson attempted 5. Ohio State had the 1 sack by Hero Canoe. I think the other one was like a quarterback run that Jada McKenzie got him. I don't think went down as a sack. I'm looking here to be sure. Yeah, just the 1 sack from Hero Canoe. When Indiana was in passing situations, they were often max protecting, and Ohio State wasn't blitzing. So Ohio State was sending 4 against 7. And even if your 4 is better than their 7, like I still think more often than not, you're not going to win those battles. So it wasn't really a game to rack up sacks and get after the quarterback, I would say. But I thought the defensive line played well. I thought like all 3 levels of the defense were good. When there was a moment for a section of the defense to step up and make a play, and that was infrequent, granted, throughout the game, I thought they did it.
So my Kenyatta Jackson super psyched thing didn't really happen because they didn't have a chance to rush the passer. I did track defensive end snaps. JT Tuimoloau 39, Jack Sawyer 33, Caden Curry 16, Kenyatta Jackson 15, and Mitchell Melton 6 getting in at the end of the game. They really did lean. Like JT, a lot of the ones he didn't play were like the last 2 drives. He was in most of the time. It did feel like early on that, is this right? Kenyatta was backing up JT and Caden Curry was backing up Jack Sawyer. And then their rushman look had Caden Curry inside with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on the edge, and Curry inside as one of the defensive tackles. There was not like a look with JT inside, and mostly because it didn't factor in, like there wasn't much from Kenyatta Jackson, because I do think he's more of a pass rusher and less of a guy against the run than anybody else. And like they weren't going to throw. So this was not a game for him to show out, but there were still moments where JT was blowing people backwards into the backfield, where he was holding the line at the point of attack, where he was blowing things up in the run game. And I think that continues to be one of those things where is JT Tuimoloau going to lead this team in sacks, going to lead the Big Ten in sacks? I doubt it. Is he going to be a consistent point of attack defensive end who makes life miserable for opposing offenses? I think you saw a decent amount of that on Saturday.
Yeah, and you saw Mike Hall do a little bit of that too. He knocked the center or the guard back into the quarterback's lap a few times. And like that's the kind of stuff too. Like people want sacks, I get that. I think this defense needs to generate more sacks than it does. Like that counts too. When you knock the center back into the quarterback's face and he has to step to his right and then he airmails a pass, like that's pretty good. I get it's not quite the havoc play that knocking him on his butt and pushing it back a few yards can be, but it's still effective defensive line play, and I thought they got that. I thought it was cool to see Jada McKenzie step up and like make some plays. Like he's a 5th year guy who's like never played, and my thought on him was like he's never going to be a factor, and maybe he won't be for the rest of the year, but like Jim Knowles was talking him up a little bit earlier in the week, and he actually kind of showed up. So I thought the tackles played well. Mike Hall probably did not play as much as I thought he would. Perhaps that is also a byproduct of this being mostly a run game, and when it's mostly a run game, your defensive tackles do get beat up quite a bit, so maybe you don't want to overexpose him unnecessarily. So I'm not getting too caught up in that. We're not probably going to know. I mean, they might go crazy next week. That doesn't mean anything. They're playing a pretty heavy pass team in 2 weeks. So if you want to get a feel for how this team can actually get after a quarterback, this was not the game for it, and I think the game against Western Kentucky will be.
Sonny Styles, you tracked him.
Mm-hmm.
There was one play in particular where it just felt like he was a down in the box linebacker, and he made a play on a guy and like shoved him out of bounds for a loss on a run play. And I was like, oh, he's Darren Lee. He's the same linebacker. What are we doing here? Like all these different names. He's going to play all over the field. Like he's the same linebacker who's going to maybe blitz at times, maybe be up, right behind an edge rusher at times, drop in coverage at times, but be like involved in the play almost all the time the way Darren Lee was in 2014.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was essentially a Sam linebacker in this game. Part of that is Indiana. I didn't track this, but I would venture to guess that probably on, I don't know, 85% of their offensive snaps, they had either 2 tight ends or 2 running backs on the field and only 2 receivers. So there wasn't a guy in the slot all that often for like Sonny to contend with. When there was, sometimes it was a tight end. They did take him off the field. I think for the first third down of the game, they sort of went more to a true nickel package and put Cameron Martinez out there. I think I have that right. Maybe I missed Sonny. Like they have so many like tall, long, athletic guys that like sometimes I'll see like, oh, there's Davis Igbinosun. Is that Sonny Styles? Like they're from the TV angle. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to tell, but I think they took Sonny out for that play. But otherwise, he was out there all the time and almost always down in the box. Basically playing linebacker, as you said. And like he had a good game. He what did he have? 5 tackles. He had a 1.5 tackles for loss. He had a nice sequence where I think he had a play. I have it written down here because I want to make sure I have it right. He had the play where he pushed the guy out of bounds, and then like on the next play he missed a tackle in the backfield, and the run actually got out for a little bit, and then he came back on the play after that on 3rd and 5, and they ran another option pitch play, and Sonny kind of took away the pitch man and drove him out of bounds, and I think they ended up losing a yard or 2 on that play. So it was nice to see him like make a good play, make a mistake, and then rebound and make another good play immediately.
But you talked about the third down early where he came off the field, but didn't come off the field much, right?
No, I think otherwise he was out there for. I kind of stopped keeping count when I realized like this wasn't a real game for them. But that was the only time, other than perhaps late in the game, when I noticed he was not on the field, was that first third down.
Okay, and real like around the ball.
Yeah,
like all the things of like when it was like briefly in the spring when it felt like Sonny Styles was playing some center field adjuster stuff, and it was like, oh no. You don't want him floating around in the back. You want him up at the line of scrimmage. He was in the mix constantly.
Yeah, he was, and I think it's going to. We didn't see him really blitz at all, I don't think. Or we saw some run blitzes, but like they didn't use him as a blitzer on passing downs. I still think there's a lot to get into with him there. Like we didn't see CJ Hicks really. I don't think he played defense at all. I think there's stuff to get into there with him as well. They didn't really have to go to the jack package because they were just so dominant up front. So they didn't. Why show that when you don't have to? So it was not a game where like Sonny was all over the place. This guy's going to be an All-American, but I thought you saw enough flashes, and I think there's a lot more on the table for him too as he gets more comfortable.
Let's talk a little bit more about the other safeties. Josh Proctor and Lathan Ransom started. Were you surprised that Josh Proctor started?
No, only because I think twice now someone has gone out of their way to mention that Jahad Carter was a little banged up, and then like Jahad Carter didn't play today. So if Jahad Carter's not physically able to start, even though he wasn't on the availability report, like, do you really want to start a true freshman? Because your other options are Josh Proctor, Malik Hartford. So I get not wanting to start a true freshman in that spot. And then when Josh Proctor is kind of the only other option.
And then Malik Hartford came in later in the game, though.
Yeah, he appeared for the first time in the 3rd quarter, I think.
That seems right.
Late 3rd quarter, yeah.
Okay. And early in the game, there were some plays where Josh Proctor was making plays up at the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. That's just, there was a play where Proctor and Ransom started as 2 deep safeties, like lined up next to each other. And then once, I guess it was an option run to the left, Proctor comes up and makes a play on the ball carrier, like at the line of scrimmage. I mean, Josh Proctor did do a couple things early on that looked pretty good.
Josh Proctor, if Josh Proctor calibrates your position, and then you are still in that position when he gets to you, he's going to destroy you. If you move the slightest bit left or right, he's probably going to miss you. And that is, I think, the I don't know, like, if danger is the right word or not, But that is why I have reservations about playing him in that position, because I think he's so aggressive and like triggers so hard downhill that he is kind of easy to shake out of his shoes if you have that ability. And that did happen on a play. Like, he was playing free safety. He came down, the guy shifted, Josh missed him, and I think Lathan Ransom was there to clean the play up. Happened on a kick return too, where or maybe it was a punt return, where Josh Proctor flew down the field and missed the guy. He's going to miss some tackles. And I don't think that's a quality you want in your free safety, top end of the defense, mistake eraser. And like, I think Malik Hartford has a little bit of that in him too. So I'm not saying that like he'd automatically be better, but it was like Josh Proctor has often looked like a liability out there when he's played, and he did not look like that today. He missed like 2 tackles, and I'm harping on them. He had more good plays than bad, so a lot more good plays than bad.
The linebackers were the linebackers, right? Tommy Eichenberg made a hit in a hole that you could like hear the crunch through the TV. Those guys are who they are, and it felt like you're talking about, again, against an option team, build a wall with the defensive line and let the linebackers flow. And there wasn't a lot of stuff that got out of the house because they cleaned up most everything.
Yeah. Tommy was good. I think, Steel Chambers was good, and he lost kind of a jump ball situation in pass coverage, but like he was there in a good spot.
He was all over that dude.
Yeah, the guy just like made a really good catch. So, yeah, they were good. I would have liked to see more CJ Hicks. I don't think we saw any of CJ Hicks. We saw a very little bit of Cody Simon at the end.
Yeah.
They did not go to their 4-3 package like they did last year because they're already in it when Sonny Styles was on the field. So,
yeah. We're in, I think you mentioned it on a show the other day. It's like we're back in the like positions don't matter because Pete Warner was everything, and positions don't matter because Sonny Styles is everything. And so we're trying to figure out, are you in nickel? Or do you have 3 linebackers on the field? Is he a safe? He's just Sonny. And so it simplifies everything, but it also confuses things at the same time. So yeah, I was tracking CJ Hicks. I didn't write anything down.
Right.
I don't think I missed anything. So let's talk about Jim Knowles, because that's like the part of the defense I think everybody's most curious about. I felt like, yes, again, with the caveat that it was an option team not trying to score.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought Jim Knowles was pretty chill.
Yes.
Which, good. This is supposed to be an experienced defense where you're dropping some playmakers on top. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure there was a moment where I noticed a blitz at all, where I felt like, oh, here they come. They kind of just rushed 4, let everybody else flow to the ball, don't have breakdowns, don't give up big plays. And as long as you do that, there was no chance this offense was going to do anything.
Yeah, I think in Indiana, was expecting the opposite, which is why they did a lot of max protection. They tried to run a couple quarterback draws, and it was just like, oh, they didn't do the thing with Hutt they were going to do, and now that play is just dead to rights. So yeah, it was. There were times where last year that I think the defense and offense were a little bit out of sync in terms of like the defense probably being a little more aggressive than it needed to be, and then opening itself up to like big plays that didn't really change the outcome of a game. Because I'm not necessarily talking about Georgia and Michigan, but like just put points on the board that didn't have to be there. I think when it's apparent that you can kind of just sit back and the other team can't do anything to you, then it's okay to just sit back and just sort of sit on them, and that's what they did, and it's fine. I'm curious to see when Pro Football Focus does update their numbers, what exactly Ohio State's blitz rate was in this game, because it did, to your point, almost feel non-existent.
And that's what I want. I think they have a chance to be pretty darn good on defense and get back to the world of our guys are better than your guys. Yeah, we're going to disguise some stuff, and we don't want to give you a clean picture every time, and we're going to just, right at the snap, we're going to change the look, but we don't have to go crazy. Send in 6 guys and creating do or die scenarios. And so after a long off season, to sort of come out and just be chill, that can be hard. It's not as fun.
Yeah.
Right. They had 1 sack. They didn't, they weren't blowing stuff up constantly, but they didn't let Indiana get anything going. They were Indiana was never going to do anything. And that's like a nice, normal quality. This felt like 2 things to me. One is I watched basically the entire Iowa game. as my noon game. I was flipping back and forth between the Iowa game and the Colorado game for the noon starts, and it felt like I was in a college football time machine.
Hmm.
It was like, is this the same sport? You watch what Colorado's doing, then you watch what Iowa's doing. By the way, our betting show, under the team total on Iowa, 33.5. They scored touchdowns on their first 2 drives, and I was like, I'm dead. And then they scored 10 points or whatever it was the rest of the entire game. It was a smooth under on the 33.5. And it was also a 1-point under on the 25-point threshold that Brian Ferentz is supposed to hit. I thought the Ohio State game looked a lot like the Iowa game. And
yeah.
Iowa wins by not doing much on offense and playing great defense. And so long term, I'm not sure I could say anything meaner. Given my history with Iowa, I'm not sure there's a greater insult I could heave at Ohio State than they looked like Iowa. In a situation like this, with 2 new tackles and a new center and a new quarterback, and like you're just trying to sort of get through the day, like trying to win like Iowa, I don't know. In a 1-game sample, I can't even do it. It's terrible.
Yeah,
I can't sell that looking like Iowa is actually okay. It felt, honestly, watch the Iowa game for 3 hours and watch the Ohio State game for 3 hours and tell me it feels any different to you. Because you know what Iowa doesn't have? Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. But when Ohio State only has those guys catch 5 passes, it's sort of like they don't have them either.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's not as apparent that Iowa is better than Southern Utah. Or is that who they played? Southern Utah?
Utah State.
Utah State. No, yeah. Whoever they played, doesn't matter. It was apparent the entire time that Ohio State had much better players than Indiana and like just couldn't get out of first gear. So it's not entirely the same thing.
Yeah.
It is good. It is okay to win with defense.
I think that is a direct quote from Ryan Day's postgame, actually. Something like that.
Yeah, well, of course it is. That's what he says when his offense stinks. Like generally it's okay to win with defense. I don't think any Ohio State fans want to hear that at the moment. Ohio State did allow 2.8 yards per play today against Indiana, which is the second best mark they have posted under Jim Knowles. The only team that averaged fewer yards per play against Ohio State was
Northwestern in the wind?
Nope, Iowa.
And we bring the conversation full circle. Okay. So I think bottom line, and I think we're probably getting ready to get out of here.
Yeah.
We're going to come back on Monday, and we're going to rank all the Northern teams. We're going to talk about the best players in the North. We're going to do much more contextual stuff. You know, Michigan came out and blew out East Carolina. J.J. McCarthy, I think you watched him. You thought he looked pretty good. You know, some other teams are putting up big point totals. Oregon scored 80. Oklahoma scored 70 or whatever. Some teams are doing that on this day, and Ohio State didn't.
Michigan only scored 1 more touchdown than Ohio State did today.
That's true. That's true. Look
against a much worse team.
Yeah. So, in the end, I don't know if they will. They were number 3 in the country coming in. If I was voting, like I would take this into account, like based on how they looked against the level of opponent they played, you know, they didn't look like a playoff team today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to be, you know, but they didn't look like one of the 5 best teams in the country today in this game based on what they did. And I thought you could see problems. Like I think the tackle positions still have a chance to be an actual problem, and they've got to get the passing game going. And the defense was very good and very solid, but didn't have a need or an opportunity to be splashy. So in the end, like if you're being honest with yourself, I think you'd like drop them in the polls, or, you know, you'd do something to say like, well, I don't know. I actually have a couple questions about these guys, but I don't think it's anything that can't be fixed, but I think they have to get better in the next 2 weeks before they get to South Bend.
Yeah, they do. And like the thing about getting like showing the most improvement from week 1 to week 2, I think is true. Like Ohio State's going to show a ton of improvement next week because they're playing Youngstown State. And I don't know what any of it's going to mean. And it's probably not worth analyzing all that much, which is unfortunate, but that's the way the schedule shakes out. They need to be better than they were today. I think that's probably true every team in week 1. They more than likely are going to fall in the poll because I'd imagine whoever wins the LSU Florida State game is going to jump them. And maybe people want to move like Alabama ahead of them for some reason, or Penn State if it puts one on West Virginia tonight. And that's fine. It doesn't really matter where they are in the AP poll right now. All that matters is that they build on top of this and improve and find themselves in a much better state when they have to go to South Bend in 3 weeks.
We'll actually end with this. What Ohio State has had at quarterback in the Ryan Day era, including when he was the offensive coordinator. So from the last year of J.T. Barrett to Dwayne Haskins to Justin Fields to C.J. Stroud. Is there any reason after game one to think that they're just going to be a cut below that this year, that they can't expect that? Or is there every reason to think that, no, they can, CJ didn't have a great first half against Minnesota in 2021, and we saw what CJ Stroud became, they can throw the ball the way that Ohio State has thrown the ball in the Ryan Day era? Or is it possible it's just going to be 25% under what we're used to?
I think it's going to be probably under what we're used to. I don't know if I think right now that's going to be 25%. I think it'll be a noticeable percentage, but I think they can be like 10%. By the way, if they are, they're still among the best passing offenses in the country, and that's still a top 5 quarterback play in the country. So I didn't come into this season at all thinking that they were going to be as good as they were at that position with CJ Stroud, who was the second pick in the draft, and Justin Fields, who is one of the more dynamic athletes to play the position in the last decade. But I still think they're going to be good enough.
And the defense might be really good. The defense. Yeah. I think we had a big conversation last year about talking with Jim Knowles when he got here of how good does his defense have to be? And it was we over the course of the offseason before 2022, it was top 25, top 20, top 10, top 5 best, right? It kept inching up or whatever. And then it wound up being, I don't know, probably top 20. But when you have CJ Stroud and you have the year Marvin had last year and you have 3 NFL guys on the offensive line, that was enough. I do think today was a little bit of an indication. I do think if they want to get where they want to go, they might have to have one of the 5 best defenses in the country, because the offense will be very good, but maybe not game breaking. But that formula might work because they might have that.
Yeah, I think that could be true, especially obviously they got to go to Notre Dame. We keep talking about it. They have to go to Wisconsin in October. There's a big game sort of every month looming for them. So I think this offense will continue to get better throughout the course of the season, but the defense might have to carry them early on. And it just so happens that in the midst of that, you're going to play a pretty big marquee game in a couple weeks.
And you were saying today when we were chatting that Shedeur Sanders is better than Sam Hartman, because you still think Sam Hartman is not very good. I probably agree with that. So basically, we're at the point of thank goodness for Ohio State they don't play Colorado.
Yeah, we've arrived there finally. Shout out to Colorado, man. I thought they were going to get their doors blown off. So good for them.
Yeah, I mean that they did everything right. They played hard, man. They came out, their guys were breaking tackles on the first drive, and it was they're buying into this. They're in. Deion Sanders got these guys in a headspace to go out and play their butts off, and they did. So we appreciate you guys joining us on this post-game show. The plan is to do this every week. The plan is for Bill and I to do a Kings of the North kind of breakdown of where Ohio State fits into Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, everybody else that matters every Monday. So we'd that one won't be live, but we hope to see you there for that. And then, of course, here on the podcast feed all week, the podcast daily every morning. Jeremy Birmingham checking in with his recruiting stuff, Bermanology. We're going to have Buckeye Q's where we're breaking down stuff with Ohio State players. Landis, just again, the cornucopia of Ohio State coverage on this YouTube channel and on our podcast feeds that people are accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, everything you saw last year, Austin and Berm have done a Snap Judgments. It's probably up already as we're talking about this. You can go watch that. Austin is also going to do the Notebook. That also might be up already as we're talking. He's going to have a recap with Zach Boren on Sunday. You can watch that. You saw him do it last year with Anthony Schlegel. He's going to do a similar thing with Zach Boren on Sunday. So we'll have a couple more looks at this. Berm and I'm hoping could do the TV rewatch for the Monday Daily too, like we did last year. But either way, you'll get a daily on Monday and then plenty of coverage throughout the week. Multiple shows per day. Daily, Snap Judgments, Kings of Columbus, all of it. We can't, if you don't like us, you're going to see a lot of us.
Yeah, that's a great plus. If you don't like us, too bad. We're not going away. Yeah. And hopefully at some point I will stop sweating through my clothes again. I am a sweaty person generally, but I'm also ill, and so that's why this is the whole mess that it is right now.
I want to give a shout out to you for powering through that. So it's not an easy thing to deal with when you're doing a show.
It's game time, David. Yeah. Come on, it's game time. All right, so thanks again to everybody for joining us here. We hope you make this a regular part of your Ohio State Saturdays. That'll be our plan, to go up about 10 minutes after the game and give you a good hour plus on what happened in the game. And listen, nobody's perfect. And Landis, you and I are starting to talk about more teams beyond Ohio State. But, like I was watching the post-game show on TV and they called him Amika. And it's like, all right, I don't know. You could watch that show or you could watch this. What are you doing? Right. So thanks again to everybody. We'll catch you on Kings of Columbus. We'll catch you on everything else we do for now. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the post-game show on the podcast.